Mike Sanders, a former NCAA wrestler and a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, had a physique that could be described as formidable and powerful. When he was just 9 years old, he astonished everyone by overpowering a 13-year-old bully. No one could comprehend how he managed such a feat until his parents, after countless sessions with various therapists and psychiatrists, uncovered that Mike had a unique hormonal imbalance. This imbalance flooded his body with adrenaline, endowing him with a momentary burst of superhuman strength. To help him manage this overwhelming surge of energy, he was prescribed medication for those moments when he seemed on the brink of losing control. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. It became clear that his immense energy needed to be channeled into rigorous physical activity, steering him away from any situations that might trigger his fight or flight response. His parents diligently ensured he stayed on this path, enrolling him in the school wrestling team and encouraging his BJJ practice. In addition to physical training, his mother introduced him to various meditation techniques, which helped him maintain a sense of calm. The combination of these efforts worked wonders, transforming Mike into a remarkably composed individual, though those who knew him well affectionately dubbed him the Hulk. Mike's coaches were well aware of the extraordinary potential he possessed. They would motivate him intensely before each match, knowing that once his inner Hulk was unleashed, victory was inevitable. However, there remained a lingering uncertainty about the true extent of his power if he were ever to lose complete control. This ever-present mystery added a layer of intrigue and caution to his remarkable story. Mike Sanders' college years passed without much difficulty, leading to a smooth transition into adulthood. He secured a pleasant job, and his life seemed to take a wonderful turn when he married Karen. After concluding a successful negotiation in Portland that promised to boost the cash flow for the software company he worked for, Mike was headed home. Adding to his joy, he had the chance to meet his younger sister, Emily, who had traveled from Eugene, where she was a student at the University of Oregon. They shared a delightful dinner at the Courtyard by Marriott and spent hours catching up, cherishing the rare opportunity to reconnect after several years apart. The evening left Mike feeling fulfilled and grateful for the time spent with Emily. As he journeyed home, his thoughts turned to Karen, his beloved wife of nearly 4 years. The nature of his job often kept him away from her, a reality he despised but had come to accept. Despite the distance, his anticipation grew as their 4th wedding anniversary approached. It was just 2 days away, and Mike had already planned a special celebration. Unbeknownst to Karen, he had made a reservation at a charming local resort for the weekend. He had also ordered a stunning emerald teardrop necklace, which he intended to present to her at the resort. He planned to pick up the necklace from the jeweler the following afternoon. However, as he prepared to board his flight, a sense of unease crept in. He had called Karen's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Trying the house phone yielded the same result. Mike reassured himself that she was probably out shopping with a friend. Yet a small knot of worry lingered in his mind as he looked forward to reuniting with her and sharing the special surprise he had meticulously planned. As Mike thought about Karen, he felt a pang of longing. Standing just under 5.5 feet tall, with her long wavy blonde hair, striking green eyes, and a light complexion that seemed to carry a perpetual sun-kissed glow, she was the epitome of beauty to him. However, despite her sweetness and the love he had for her, there was one aspect of their relationship that he struggled with: her intense jealousy. Karen was usually one of the kindest women he had ever met, but her baseless accusations of infidelity drove him to frustration. He adored her deeply and could never fathom betraying her trust. He made every effort to demonstrate his unwavering loyalty, hoping to assuage her insecurities. Yet her jealousy had reached such a level that even a simple business meeting with a female colleague would ignite her suspicions of an affair. Mike had thought he had addressed the issue once and for all when he urged her to hire a private investigator to monitor him. He hoped that seeing undeniable proof of his faithfulness would finally put her fears to rest. Despite his efforts, the constant cycle of jealousy and false accusations was wearing on him, leaving him more than a little exasperated. He yearned for Karen to understand his devotion and to find peace in their relationship, free from the shadows of unfounded doubts. It wasn't as if Mike was entirely open with Karen. He did harbor a few secrets, and her relentless accusations of infidelity threatened to expose one of them in an especially ugly manner. As he pondered her nagging, he felt his heart rate quicken. Attempting to calm himself, he took a series of deep breaths, but the effort was futile. The familiar heat began to rise in his face, a clear sign he needed to regain his composure swiftly. Reaching into his pocket, he retrieved a small packet of pills. He swallowed one, and after a few tense minutes, he began to feel a sense of calm wash over him, his heartbeat gradually returning to a steady rhythm. The man seated beside him observed him with a look of concern. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked, the worry evident in his voice. "Do you need me to call someone for you?" Mike shook his head, offering a reassuring, albeit strained, smile. "No, but thank you for your concern. It's just an old heart condition. I've got medication to manage it." The man nodded, still looking slightly uneasy, but respected Mike's assurance. As Mike leaned back in his seat, he couldn't help but reflect on how the stress of Karen's baseless suspicions was taking a toll on him, both physically and emotionally. He hoped the upcoming anniversary surprise would help to alleviate some of her insecurities and bring a sense of tranquility back into their relationship. The man nodded and reclined in his seat, but kept a cautious eye on Mike, just in case. Finally, the plane touched down, and Mike disembarked, grabbing his luggage and heading to his car in the short-term parking lot. He tried calling Karen again, only to be met with her voicemail once more. He encountered the same result when he called their house. Where on earth could she be, he muttered to himself, frustration bubbling up. He started the car and began the drive home. When he finally pulled into his garage, he noticed Karen's car was absent. It struck him as odd, given it was around 7 p.m., and she was usually home from work by 6. Maybe she decided to go out for a drink with some colleagues, he mused. Although it was a rare occurrence, he never minded her taking some time to unwind with friends. However, she would typically call or text to inform him. More importantly, she knew he was returning home today. Normally, she would ensure she was there to greet him and spend some time together after his trips. As Mike entered the house, a wave of unease washed over him. The quiet was unsettling, a stark contrast to the usual warmth and welcome he expected. He set his luggage down and checked the kitchen and living room, hoping to find a note or some indication of where Karen might be. But there was nothing. He sighed deeply, pulling out his phone once again to try her number. The unanswered calls only heightened his concern. He thought about how much he missed her and how eager he had been to share his successful day and the plans he had meticulously arranged for their anniversary. Yet, with each passing minute, the anxiety gnawed at him, the mystery of her whereabouts casting a shadow over his homecoming. He grabbed his things and trudged into the dark house, the emptiness amplifying his unease. He put his luggage away and headed downstairs, hoping to find a note from Karen explaining her absence. When he found nothing, he made himself a cup of coffee, the warmth of the mug providing a small comfort. This was strange, he thought. Karen always informed him if she was going to be out, so why was there no note? As he sipped his coffee, the silence around him seemed to grow heavier. He pondered the situation, his mind racing with possibilities. Just as he was about to try calling her again, his phone rang. Seeing Karen's name on the screen, he quickly answered. "Karen," he asked, relief and frustration mingling in his voice. "Where are you?" "I'm sorry, Mike," she replied, her voice sounding slightly rushed. "I was getting ready for tonight and didn't realize you had called until just a few minutes ago." "Getting ready for tonight?" Mike repeated, confused. "What's going on tonight?" There was a brief pause before Karen answered, "I wanted to surprise you, so I've been busy setting everything up for our anniversary celebration. I didn't want you to know until everything was perfect." Mike felt a wave of relief wash over him, mixed with a tinge of guilt for having doubted her. "Oh, Karen, you didn't have to do that. I was just worried when I couldn't reach you." "I know," she said softly. "I should have left a note or something. I'm sorry for making you worry." He sighed, the tension in his chest easing. "It's okay. I'm just glad you're all right. I can't wait to see what you've planned." "You'll love it," Karen promised. "I'll be home soon. I've just got a few more things to finish up." Mike smiled, his earlier anxieties fading. "All right, I'll be here waiting. I love you." "I love you too, Mike. See you soon." As he hung up the phone, Mike felt a sense of peace settles over him. He finished his coffee, looking forward to the evening ahead. Whatever Karen had planned, he knew it would be special, just like her. "What were you getting ready for?" Mike asked, curiosity tinged with a hint of relief. "It's a little surprise," Karen replied with a smile in her voice. "Some friends and I wanted to welcome you home tonight in a special way. Why don't you come over so we can celebrate?" "Sure, where are you?" Mike asked, feeling a mixture of excitement and anticipation. She gave him an address, which he quickly wrote down. "What is this place anyway? Is it a club or a restaurant or something?" "It's a private club at an old friend's house," she explained. "We thought it would be perfect for a combination welcome home and anniversary party." "That sounds like a lot of fun," Mike said, feeling his earlier worries dissipate. Karen laughed lightly. "Yes, I promise it will be. Just wear something casual, okay?" "Okay, I'll see you soon," Mike agreed, feeling a renewed sense of anticipation. As he hung up the phone, he felt a wave of excitement wash over him. He quickly changed into something more casual and headed out, eager to see what Karen and their friends had planned. The address she had given him wasn't too far, and the drive allowed him a few moments to let go of the day's stress and focus on the celebration ahead. When he arrived, he found the house to be charming and inviting. Lights twinkled in the evening dusk, and laughter echoed from within. As he walked up to the door, he felt a sense of gratitude for Karen and the effort she had put into making this night special. Opening the door, he was greeted with cheers and smiling faces. Karen rushed up to him, wrapping her arms around him in a warm embrace. "Welcome home, Mike," she whispered. "Thank you, Karen," he said, holding her close. "This is amazing." "Let's get inside and start the celebration," she said, leading him into the house where friends and familiar faces waited to celebrate their special night together. As the evening unfolded, Mike felt overwhelmed by the love and joy that surrounded him. It was a night filled with laughter, good company, and a deep sense of belonging that he cherished. The surprise party was perfect, and he realized just how much he had missed these moments of connection and happiness. The doubts and worries that had plagued him earlier seemed distant and insignificant now, replaced by a profound sense of contentment and gratitude. "See you, babe," she said before ending the call. Strange, he thought. She didn't tell him she loved him, yet this was supposed to be a surprise anniversary party. There was something in her tone that made him uneasy, leaving him to wonder what was going on. He went upstairs, showered, shaved, and dressed in blue jeans and a polo shirt. He looked up the address on Google Maps and noticed it was in a relatively rough part of town. Who could she know that lived out there? He was familiar with most of her colleagues from the insurance office, and none of them lived in that area. This mystery friend didn't fit into any of the circles he knew. He remembered that Karen used to associate with a tougher crowd in her younger days, but he thought she had left that behind. Locking up the house, he got into his car and entered the address into his GPS. Following the directions, he felt a growing sense of unease as he approached his destination. When he arrived, he was taken aback. A medium-sized house sat in the center of a lot, enclosed by a chain-link fence. Pickups and motorcycles were parked around the property, and none of the vehicles were familiar to him. His concern deepened. He parked his car and walked up to the front door. When he knocked, a large man wearing a t-shirt and jeans opened the door. Mike immediately noticed the beer in his hand and the rap music blaring from inside. The atmosphere felt completely off from what he expected. Hi, Mike. Karen told me to come here, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The man gave him a once-over before stepping aside. Yeah, come on in. The party's in the back. As Mike entered the house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The inside was dimly lit, and the scent of beer and smoke filled the air. He walked through the crowded living room, filled with people who didn't seem like Karen's usual friends, and headed toward the back where he hoped to find her. When he finally reached the backyard, he spotted Karen talking with a group of people he didn't recognize. She looked up and saw him, her face lighting up with a smile. There you are, she called out, waving him over. I'm so glad you made it. Mike walked over, trying to mask his apprehension. Hey Karen, this is quite the place. She laughed and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek. I know it's a bit different, but I thought a change of scene would be fun. Come on, let me introduce you to everyone. As the evening went on, Mike tried to relax and enjoy the party, but the nagging feeling in his gut wouldn't go away. He mingled with the guests, some of whom were surprisingly friendly despite their rough appearances. However, the unease never fully dissipated. He kept a close eye on Karen, who seemed to be having a great time, and wondered why she had chosen such an unconventional venue for their celebration. By the end of the night, Mike still felt like something was off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. As they drove home, he couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that had settled over him. Karen chatted happily about the party, oblivious to his lingering doubts. He decided to keep his concerns to himself for now, hoping that perhaps he was just overthinking things. Yeah, the man asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and challenge. I'm Mike Sanders, and my wife Karen asked me to meet her here. I hope I have the right address. The man's smile seemed forced, not quite reaching his eyes. He extended his hand, and Mike shook it, feeling an unsettling vibe. You must be Karen's old man. You can call me Ray. We've been expecting you. Come on in. Mike stepped inside, his eyes quickly scanning the room. Several other large men were lounging around, all giving him the same unreadable smiles. Despite their seemingly friendly gestures, Mike felt no genuine warmth. Hey everyone, the man of the hour is finally here, Ray announced, his voice booming through the room. The other men nodded and smiled at Mike, but their expressions felt hollow. Mike's unease grew as he scanned the room, looking for any sign of Karen. Where's Karen? Mike asked, trying to keep his voice steady and casual. Oh, she's downstairs getting ready for the main event, Ray said, prompting chuckles from the others. Want a beer? Yeah, sure, Mike replied. One of the men handed him a cold bottle of beer. Thanks, Mike said, opening the bottle and taking a cautious sip. So what is this main event? He asked Ray, trying to sound more curious than concerned. Ray grinned, a hint of mischief in his eyes. That's the surprise. Your old lady wanted to do something special for your anniversary and asked us to help her out. Mike forced a smile, but his mind was racing. Well, that sounds interesting. Ray clapped him on the back. Don't worry, man. It's all in good fun. Karen's got something really special planned for you. Mike nodded, but the feeling of something being off persisted. He took another sip of his beer, trying to calm his nerves. The house felt oppressive, the laughter and music in stark contrast to his growing sense of dread. "Mind if I go check on her?" Mike asked, hoping to find Karen and get some answers. Sure, Ray said, waving him off. "She's downstairs. Just follow the music." Mike made his way to the basement stairs, the heavy thud of music growing louder with each step. He descended into the dimly lit basement, where a small crowd had gathered. There, in the center of the room, stood Karen, looking radiant and out of place among the rough crowd. "Mike," she exclaimed, rushing over to him. "I'm so glad you made it." "Karen, what's going on here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice low. "It's a surprise, remember," she said, smiling brightly. "I wanted to do something different for our anniversary, something memorable." Mike took her hands, searching her eyes for any hint of what was truly going on. "Karen, this place, these people, are you sure about this?" She squeezed his hands reassuringly. "Trust me, Mike. Tonight is going to be amazing. Just go with it, okay?" He nodded, though his unease remained. As the evening unfolded, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. The tension in the air, the cryptic remarks from Ray, and the unfamiliar face all added to his sense of disquiet. Mike tried to blend in, chatting with a few guests and making small talk, but his mind kept wandering back to Karen. She was mingling effortlessly, laughing and smiling, seemingly at ease. Yet, now and then, he caught a fleeting look of concern in her eyes, quickly masked by her bright demeanor. "Hey, Mike, come join us for a game," one of the men called out, gesturing to a makeshift poker table in the corner. "Sure," Mike replied, forcing a smile as he joined the group. He sat down, trying to focus on the cards, but his mind was elsewhere. The game proceeded, with laughter and friendly banter, but Mike felt like an outsider looking in. As the night wore on, the music got louder and the atmosphere grew rowdier. Mike found himself constantly checking his watch, wondering how much longer this so-called surprise would last. Finally, Ray approached him with a grin. "Ready for the main event?" Ray asked, his tone carrying an edge of excitement. "Yeah, I guess so," Mike replied, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. "Follow me," Ray said, leading him to a side door that opened into another room. The room was dimly lit, with a single spotlight illuminating a small stage. Karen appeared at Mike's side, slipping her hand into his. "I wanted to do something special for you," she whispered. Mike looked at her, searching her eyes for any sign of what was to come. "Karen, what is this?" he asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. She smiled softly. "Just trust me, okay?" Before he could respond, the lights dimmed further, and the room fell silent. A figure stepped onto the stage, and the spotlight focused on them. It was a man holding a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight," the man began. "We have a special treat for Mike Sanders, courtesy of his wonderful wife, Karen." Mike glanced at Karen, who squeezed his hand reassuringly. The man continued, revealing that Karen had arranged for a private performance by a local band they both loved but hadn't seen in years. As the band started playing, Mike felt a wave of relief wash over him. The music filled the room, creating a warm, nostalgic atmosphere. As the night continued, Mike finally began to relax. He and Karen danced together, the earlier tension melting away. He realized that, despite the rough start and his initial concerns, Karen had indeed planned something memorable and special. By the end of the night, Mike felt a profound sense of gratitude and love for Karen. The evening had turned out to be a celebration of their journey together, filled with unexpected moments and heartfelt surprises. As they drove home, Mike couldn't help but smile, thankful for the love and effort Karen had put into making their anniversary truly unforgettable. The far side of the room and a few men were gathered around it, playing a game. The atmosphere felt heavy and expectant, and Mike's unease grew with each passing second. "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage," Mike said, trying to sound composed. "Who are you guys?" Ray smirked. "Well, that over there is Tom," he said, pointing at one of the men. "Over there is Jerry, and the guy next to him is Sam," he continued. "That big fella back there we call Bull. I'm sure you can see why." Mike glanced at Bull, a massive, muscular man standing by the kitchen table, his expression as cold as the steel knife sheathed on Jerry's hip. All of them looked as mean as snakes, and the sight of the knife made Mike's stomach churn. "And you're all Karen's friends?" Mike asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yep," Tom said. "Been friends for a while. Haven't seen her much since she married you, though." "She never mentioned any of you to me before," Mike said, his suspicion growing. "I'm not surprised," Tom replied with a shrug. "Most people try to avoid us as much as they can." "And you have a private club here?" Mike inquired, trying to gather more information. "Yeah," Ray said, a grin spreading across his face. "Down in the basement. Built it ourselves. We like to get together from time to time, have a few drinks, bring in some entertainment, you know." The others chuckled at that, but Mike's instinct screamed that something was very wrong. The feeling intensified as he heard footsteps coming up from the basement. "She's ready," a sixth man said, entering the front room. "Is this her old man?" the newcomer asked, eyeing Mike with a calculating gaze. "Yeah," Ray confirmed. "Mike, this here's Jake. He'll escort you down." "What's going to happen?" Mike asked, his voice betraying his nervousness. "A little surprise," Ray said, a glint in his eye. "I promise it'll be an evening you won't forget." The others chuckled again, but Mike's anxiety was reaching its peak. "It'll be all right. Come on, Karen is waiting for you," Jake said, motioning for Mike to follow. Mike walked over to Jake, who led him down the stairs. As he descended, Ray called out, "Happy anniversary, Mike." The basement was dimly lit, with a small bar in one corner and a well-lit stage area occupying one end of the room. A curtain hung across the stage, and what worried Mike the most was the bed positioned in the center of the stage and the camera mounted on a tripod a few feet back. Several neon beer signs adorned the walls, casting a lurid glow over the dark, bar-like room. Men stood around a pool table at the far end, casting glances his way. Jake guided him to a seat near the stage. "Wait here," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mike sat down, his mind racing. The setup looked more like something out of a seedy club than a place for an anniversary celebration. He glanced around, hoping to see Karen, but she was nowhere in sight. After a few minutes, the curtain on the stage was pulled back, revealing Karen. She stood there, looking nervous but trying to maintain a confident facade. She wore a dress that Mike had never seen before, one that clung to her in a way that seemed out of character. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ray's voice boomed from somewhere behind Mike. "Let's give a warm welcome to the star of the evening, Karen." The men in the room hooted and hollered, making Mike's skin crawl. Karen's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw a flicker of regret and fear. But she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Karen, what is this?" Mike called out, unable to hide his concern. It's just a performance," she stammered. "I thought it would be fun." Mike's heart pounded in his chest. "Karen, we need to leave. Now." Ray stepped into view, blocking Mike's path. "Relax, Mike. Enjoy the show." Mike looked at Karen, desperation in his eyes. "Karen, please." She hesitated, then stepped forward. "Ray, this isn't what I wanted," she said softly. Ray's expression darkened. "You agreed to this, Karen. Don't back out now." Mike stood up, ready to confront Ray, but Bull and the others moved in, forming a barrier. "Sit down," Mike Ray said coldly. "Karen, come with me," Mike insisted, his voice steady despite his fear. Karen took a deep breath and walked off the stage toward Mike. "I'm sorry, Ray. I can't do this." Ray's face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this, Karen." The basement was dimly lit, with a small bar in one corner and a well-lit stage area occupying one end of the room. A curtain hung across the stage, and what worried Mike the most was the bed positioned in the center of the stage and the camera mounted on a tripod a few feet back. Several neon beer signs adorned the walls, casting a lurid glow over the dark, bar-like room. Men stood around a pool table at the far end, casting glances his way. Jake guided him to a seat near the stage. "Wait here," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mike sat down, his mind racing. The setup looked more like something out of a seedy club than a place for an anniversary celebration. He glanced around, hoping to see Karen, but she was nowhere in sight. After a few minutes, the curtain on the stage was pulled back, revealing Karen. She stood there, looking nervous but trying to maintain a confident facade. She wore a dress that Mike had never seen before, one that clung to her in a way that seemed out of character. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ray's voice boomed from somewhere behind Mike. "Let's give a warm welcome to the star of the evening, Karen." The men in the room hooted and hollered, making Mike's skin crawl. Karen's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw a flicker of regret and fear. But she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Karen, what is this?" Mike called out, unable to hide his concern. It's just a performance," she stammered. "I thought it would be fun." Mike's heart pounded in his chest. "Karen, we need to leave. Now." Ray stepped into view, blocking Mike's path. "Relax, Mike. Enjoy the show." Mike looked at Karen, desperation in his eyes. "Karen, please." She hesitated, then stepped forward. "Ray, this isn't what I wanted," she said softly. Ray's expression darkened. "You agreed to this, Karen. Don't back out now." Mike stood up, ready to confront Ray, but Bull and the others moved in, forming a barrier. "Sit down," Mike Ray said coldly. "Karen, come with me," Mike insisted, his voice steady despite his fear. Karen took a deep breath and walked off the stage toward Mike. "I'm sorry, Ray. I can't do this." Ray's face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this, Karen." Mike grabbed her hand and pushed through the circle of men, his adrenaline surging. They made their way up the stairs, Ray's threats echoing behind them. Once outside, they ran to Mike's car, hearts pounding. As they drove away, Karen burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Mike. I thought it would be different. I just wanted to do something special for us." Mike squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Karen. We're safe now. That's all that matters." They drove in silence, the tension slowly easing. Despite the fear and chaos of the evening, they knew they had each other, and that was enough. The opposite end of the basement had a few tables scattered around. A jukebox, the source of the blaring music, occupied one area of the wall. As Mike entered, he noticed two other men in the room, their eyes fixed on him. Jake led him to a chair positioned in front of the stage, adjacent to a small table. "Have a seat," Jake said, gesturing toward the chair. "Where's Karen?" Mike asked, trying to mask his growing apprehension. "She'll be out shortly. Go on, sit down. You can put your beer on the table if you want." Mike set the beer down and scanned the room, his instincts screaming at him to leave. Yet he knew the 5 men upstairs wouldn't let him go easily, and he worried about Karen's safety if he attempted to flee. He took another sip of beer and then set the bottle on the table. The moment he sat in the chair, Jake and the other two men swiftly grabbed his arms and zip-tied them to the chair's arms. "What the hell is going on?" Mike demanded, his anger rising. The men ignored him, securing his ankles to the chair legs with more zip ties. "Get me out of here right now," Mike demanded, his voice edged with panic. "Shut up," a hole he suddenly heard, recognizing the voice of his wife. He looked up to see Karen standing there, dressed provocatively in nothing but a tiny thong and a half bra. "What the hell is this?" Mike shouted, bewildered. "Why are you dressed like that? Who are these guys?" "This is to celebrate our anniversary," she spat, venom in her voice. "These guys are my friends, and they're going to help me teach you a lesson about cheating." She threw a photo onto his lap. Mike looked down to see a picture of himself having dinner with his sister. "I've never cheated on you. You've got this all wrong," he screamed, his voice desperate. Suddenly, a sharp pain exploded in his face as one of the men punched him. Mike's vision blurred and he shook his head, trying to clear it. "Stop it," Karen commanded the man, who backed off. "He'll be the one who teaches him his lesson." She turned back to her husband, her eyes cold and unforgiving. "Karen, stop this right now. We can talk about it. It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" she sneered. "It looks to me like you're enjoying yourself with that blonde floozy. So if you can enjoy yourself, can I? But unlike you, I'm not going to keep it a secret." With that, she turned away and stepped onto the stage. "Okay, boys, it's showtime." Mike tried to shout an objection, but one of the men shoved a ball gag into his mouth, silencing him. He struggled, but the bindings were too tight. By now, all the men had made their way downstairs, surrounding him. Ray stood next to Mike and leaned in close. "Nothing personal, but Karen's an old friend, so we decided to help her teach you a lesson. Now sit and enjoy the show. Don't try to be a hero. Once she's done, we'll let you go. Maybe she'll go with you, but that's up to her." Mike's mind raced as the reality of his situation sank in. Karen, the woman he loved, was hell-bent on punishing him for something he hadn't done. The men around him watched with a mix of amusement and anticipation. The music blared louder, and the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. Karen began to perform on the stage, moving provocatively to the beat of the music. Mike's heart ached, not just from the physical pain, but from the emotional betrayal. He tried to focus on finding a way out, but the zip ties held him firmly in place. The men cheered and hooted as Karen danced, their leering faces making Mike's blood boil. He strained against his restraints, but it was no use. His mind flashed back to the peaceful dinners, the quiet nights, the moments of genuine connection they had shared. How had it come to this? Suddenly, Karen stopped and looked directly at Mike. Enjoying the show, she taunted. Mike's muffled protests were drowned out by the music. Ray leaned in again. "Just relax, man. It'll be over soon. Then you can go back to your perfect little life, assuming she lets you." Mike's eyes burned with anger and betrayal. He felt utterly helpless, watching as Karen continued her performance, seemingly oblivious to his suffering. He knew he had to endure this nightmare until he could find a way to escape, but the emotional scars were already forming. As the night dragged on, Mike's thoughts oscillated between rage and heartbreak. The woman he had vowed to love and cherish had orchestrated this cruel spectacle, all because of a misunderstanding. He resolved to survive this ordeal and confront her with the truth, but deep down, he feared that their relationship might never recover from this twisted night. Mike tried to protest, but the gag stifled his voice, reducing his cries to muffled sounds. "Just relax. Take your medicine. Listen like a man," Ray said, stepping back and nodding to Tom, who stood by the jukebox. Tom pressed a button, and a song began playing. As the music filled the room, Karen began dancing, twirling seductively like a stripper. She kicked off her shoes and slowly removed her remaining clothes. "You like this? Lover boy," she sneered at Mike. "Did your little blonde do this for you, huh?" She continued her provocative dance, laughing as she tossed her tiny thong at Mike. "I hope you like this, lover boy, because you're never going to touch me ever again. Come here, boys, and show little Mikey how a real man treats a woman." She laughed as all the men, except for Jerry, surrounded her. Mike's eyes widened in horror as they stripped off their clothes. Karen knelt, her actions sending a wave of revulsion through him. He shook his head violently and tried to scream through the gag, but it was no use. Jerry stood guard by Mike's chair, his arms crossed over his chest, ready to intervene if Mike tried to break free. Karen led the men to the bed on the stage, then sat down and looked directly at Mike. "This will teach you to cheat on me, you a hole," she growled, her voice filled with venom. She laid down on the bed, positioning herself provocatively. Two of the men stood by her head as Ray glanced back at Mike. "Nothing personal, but Karen is the best I've ever had," Ray laughed and turned back to her. "Ready, baby?" "Yeah, Ray." "Now take me again and make my husband watch," she replied with a twisted smile. Ray laughed and began having sex with her. The scene unfolding in front of Mike was far from arousing, it was a nightmare. He tried to control himself with the breathing exercises he had learned in his martial arts training, but the rage was building inside him. His stomach churned at the sight of Karen, and he knew she was right about one thing: he would never touch her again. Mike's vision blurred with fury and heartbreak. The humiliation was unbearable, and he could feel the anger consuming him. He thought the degradation was over when Karen got up on her knees, but he was wrong. She continued to engage with the men, each act more degrading than the last. Jerry kept a close watch on Mike, ensuring he couldn't break free. The rest of the men took turns with Karen, each one adding to Mike's torment. He struggled against his restraints, the zip ties cutting into his skin, but it was futile. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Mike's mind oscillated between disbelief and rage. He couldn't understand how Karen, the woman he had loved and trusted, could orchestrate such a horrific spectacle. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain he had ever experienced. Finally, the men seemed to tire, and Karen lay on the bed, breathing heavily. She looked at Mike with a mixture of satisfaction and contempt. "I hope you learned your lesson," she said coldly. "This is what happens to cheaters." Ray and the others began to dress, their expressions ranging from smug to indifferent. Jerry removed the gag from Mike's mouth but kept a firm grip on his shoulder. "Don't think about doing anything stupid," Jerry warned. "You're outnumbered and tied up. Just sit tight until we decide to let you go." Mike glared at Karen, his eyes filled with unspoken accusations. "You're insane," he spat out, his voice hoarse. "That woman was my sister." Karen's eyes widened for a moment. Then she quickly masked her reaction with a sneer. "Liar. I know what I saw." "You didn't see anything," Mike retorted, the pain in his voice evident. "You saw what you wanted to see." Ray stepped forward, looking between Mike and Karen. "Is that true, Karen? Was that woman his sister?" Karen hesitated, her confidence faltering. I don't know. I just saw them together and assumed." "You assumed wrong," Mike said, his voice filled with bitter anger. "And now you've ruined everything." The room fell silent, the weight of the situation sinking in. Ray looked at Karen, then at Mike. "This is messed up," he muttered. "Let's get him out of here." Jerry cut the zip ties binding Mike to the chair, and he stood up, rubbing his sore wrists. The men stepped back, giving him space. "Get out of here," Ray said, his voice lacking its earlier bravado. "And take her with you if you want." Mike didn't respond. He walked to the bed, grabbed Karen's arm, and pulled her to her feet. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and defiance. "Let's go," Mike said coldly. They left the basement and walked through the house, the silence between them heavy with unresolved tension. Once outside, Mike led Karen to his car and opened the passenger door. "Get in," he ordered. She hesitated but complied, getting into the car. Mike got in the driver's seat and started the engine. They drove in silence, the reality of what had happened hanging over them like a dark cloud. As they pulled up to their house, Mike parked the car and turned to Karen. "We're done," he said, his voice flat. "Get your things and leave." Karen looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "Mike, please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake." "It's too late for apologies," Mike replied, his tone devoid of emotion. "You didn't trust me, and now you've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Go." She got out of the car, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Mike watched as she walked into the house, knowing that their lives would never be the same. The love they once shared was shattered, and the pain of betrayal would linger long after the physical wounds had healed. Karen looked at him and laughed cruelly. "Don't worry, honey," she said sarcastically. "We're just getting warmed up, aren't we, boys?" The men laughed at that, and Mike looked up at Jerry, who was smiling as he watched the show. Mike wondered why Jerry wasn't participating in the action. Sensing Mike's gaze, Jerry looked down at him, frowned, and took Mike's head in his hands. "Watch them, not me," he growled, forcing Mike to look at the stage. The rage inside Mike continued to build as Karen carried on with her humiliating actions. "You want to see just how nasty I really can be," she taunted. "Just so you know, I'll probably get pregnant tonight," she smirked, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I'm sure you noticed no one used a condom, and I've been off my pills for the last few weeks. Don't worry, I used a diaphragm whenever we had sex, so you don't have to worry about it being yours. But you will raise this child as yours, and if you refuse, I will divorce you and wreck you. I will take away everything from you. I will make you a pariah in society and label you as a domestic abuser and a cuck." Mike shook his head, his anger blurring his vision. "You're probably wondering why Jerry hasn't done me, aren't you?" she asked, her voice dripping with mockery. "You see, Jerry prefers men over girls, and after tonight, you will too." They all laughed as Mike's face turned red hot with rage. He turned to look at Jerry, noticing that he had unzipped his jeans. "I promise you'll love it," Jerry said with a sadistic grin. And then it happened. Mike exploded. Years of martial arts training, coupled with the adrenaline-fueled rage, surged through him. In a blur of motion, he broke free from his restraints, his muscles fueled by pure, uncontrollable fury. The next thing he knew, he was standing in the middle of a pile of moaning bodies on the floor. Jerry was screaming in pain, his left hand pinned to the table by a knife buried to the hilt. Mike felt a sharp pain in his arms and legs and saw blood dripping from where the zip ties had secured him to the chair. He looked up and saw Karen wide-eyed and trembling, the bravado gone from her face. Mike's breath came in ragged gasps as he surveyed the chaos around him. The men who had tormented him and Karen now lay groaning on the floor, incapacitated by the sudden and violent outburst. His vision, still blurred by anger, turned his focus to Karen. "Karen," he said, his voice low and filled with a mix of pain and fury. "Why?" She took a step back, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. "Mike, Shut up," he snapped, taking a step towards her. "Do you have any idea what you've done? To us? To yourself?" "I just wanted to teach you a lesson," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. I thought you were cheating on me." "That woman was my sister," Mike growled, the words coming out like a curse. "You destroyed everything for a lie." Karen's face crumpled as she realized the enormity of her mistake. "Mike, please, I didn't know. I'm sorry." "Sorry," Mike laughed bitterly. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't erase what you've done." He walked over to Jerry, who was still whimpering in pain, and pulled the knife out of his hand. Jerry screamed, clutching his bleeding hand. Mike pointed the knife at Karen, though he didn't intend to use it. "Get out," he said coldly. "Get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret." Karen hesitated, then turned and fled, stumbling over the bodies of the men on the floor. Mike watched her go, his heart a mixture of sorrow and anger. Once she was gone, he dropped the knife and sank to his knees, the adrenaline leaving him exhausted and in pain. The room was silent, except for the groans of the injured men. Mike's mind raced with the events of the night, and he knew his life would never be the same. The love he once felt for Karen had been shattered, replaced by a deep sense of betrayal and loss. Slowly, he stood up, ignoring the pain in his limbs, and made his way out of the basement. He didn't look back. All he wanted was to get out of that nightmare and figure out what to do next. He knew he needed medical attention, but more importantly, he needed to find a way to rebuild his life from the wreckage Karen had caused. As he stepped out into the cool night air, he took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of liberation despite the chaos. He had survived the worst night of his life, and now, somehow, he had to find a way to move forward. "Oh, now you're scared of me." "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you physically," Mike replied, his voice cold and menacing. "But I promise you will feel my wrath. I will make sure I multiply the pain I suffered tonight and return it to you." Keeping his eyes locked on her, Mike pulled his phone out of his pocket and dialed 911. When he finished the call, he put his phone away and looked at her with contempt. "You stupid woman," he growled. "I've got you dead to rights. You cheated on me with that blonde." "I was just getting even with you," Karen stammered, her voice weak and defensive. "That blonde is my sister, you idiot," Mike snapped. "I was just having dinner with her. You let your jealousy destroy everything." Karen's face twisted with a mix of confusion and realization. "I didn't know," she whispered, but Mike could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Too late for that now," he said, his tone unyielding. The sound of sirens in the distance signaled the arrival of the police. Mike kept a watchful eye on Karen until the officers arrived, quickly explaining the situation and providing evidence of the night's events. Karen was taken into custody, still protesting her innocence. Once the police left, Mike realized he hadn't eaten since he left Portland. He drove through a fast food place for a burger. Back home, he ate quickly, then called his boss, Jim Collins, to explain the situation. "Damn, Mike. I'm sorry to hear that," Jim said sympathetically. "Look, why don't you bring in the signed contract and then take the next week off? You've got plenty of vacation time coming." "Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that," Mike replied. After the call, he showered and went to bed, exhausted but determined. The next day, he took decisive steps to reclaim his life. He went to the jewelry shop and canceled the order for Karen's necklace, paying a small restocking fee, but getting most of his money back. He also canceled the hotel reservation and had the charges reversed. Determined to move forward, he set an appointment to see Jenny Hawkins, an attorney specializing in divorce, for Friday. Just after he finished lunch, his phone rang. He saw it was Karen's parents and took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Mike. What the hell is going on, Marge?" his mother-in-law demanded. Karen called from the county jail. She said she's been arrested and they're holding her without bail. "Did you do something?" Mike couldn't believe the nerve of this woman. He counted to 10, and took a few deep breaths before responding. "Did she tell you why she was arrested?" Mike asked calmly. "She said it was all some kind of misunderstanding on your part," Marge replied, her tone accusatory. "On my part?" "Really?" Mike said, incredulous. "You mean she didn't tell you that she plotted to have me tied up, forced me to watch her have sex with multiple men, and then was going to have me sexually assaulted by one of her male friends? Didn't she tell you about that?" "What? Why would she do such a thing?" Marge's voice wavered, disbelief and shock evident. "Because she saw a picture of me having dinner with my little sister and thought I was having an affair." "The woman is nuts, Marge. Tomorrow I'm seeing an attorney and filing for divorce." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Marge spoke, her voice softer. "Mike, I don't know what to say. This doesn't sound like Karen." "Believe it," Mike said, his tone hard. "I have evidence, and the police believed it enough to arrest her. I'm done with this, Marge. It's over." "Please, Mike, let us talk to her. Maybe there's some explanation." "No," Mike interrupted. "There's no explanation that can justify what she did. This is my final decision. I'm moving on." He hung up, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. The betrayal still stung deeply, but he knew he had to protect himself and rebuild his life. The steps he took that day were the beginning of a long healing journey, and he was determined to see it through. "You can't be serious. Look, I know you're probably upset, but surely you can understand how she would feel. What would you do if you saw a picture of her eating lunch with a man?" Marge pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. "I would ask her about it. I wouldn't fly off the handle the way she did. Look, Marge, you have no idea what your daughter did. And there's no way in hell I can overlook it. I've been dealing with her insane jealousy since we got married. I'm tired of it. It ends now. As far as the divorce is concerned, let me ask you, Marge, if we reverse the roles and I tie her up and force her to watch me have sex with other women, and then have her assaulted by one of them, would you still ask your daughter to remain married to me?" Marge fell silent, unable to respond. "Don't be a hypocrite, Marge. You know very well that what I am doing to your daughter is right with that." He ended the call. When she called back, he sent the call straight to voicemail. Curious and needing answers, he went into the second bedroom where he and Karen had their home computers set up. He sat down at her computer and powered it up. Knowing her passwords, he accessed her desktop easily. He opened her email client and was shocked at what he saw. There was an email from something called Jenkins Investigations. He opened it up, and attached was a document and a photo. The photo was of him and his sister eating dinner, the same one Karen had thrown in his face earlier. He opened the document and began reading. It was a detailed report from a private investigator hired by Karen. The report included photos, timestamps, and locations, meticulously documenting Mike's movements. As he read, Mike felt a mix of anger and sadness. Karen had gone to such lengths to spy on him, driven by her baseless suspicions. The report confirmed that the woman in the photos was indeed his sister, and it detailed their dinner together, even noting the exact restaurant and the date. There was no indication of any inappropriate behavior, just two siblings catching up. The investigator's conclusion was clear: there was no evidence of infidelity. Mike leaned back in the chair, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over him. How had it come to this? Karen's jealousy had consumed her, leading her to destroy their marriage based on unfounded fears. He knew now that there was no salvaging their relationship. The trust was shattered beyond repair. Determined to move forward, Mike printed out the report and the photo. He would need this evidence for his divorce proceedings. He also saved copies to a USB drive, ensuring he had backups. As he sat in the quiet room, he reflected on the years he had spent with Karen. There had been good times, but they were overshadowed by the constant accusations and paranoia. He had tried to make things work, but it was clear now that nothing he did would have ever been enough for her. He packed up a few essentials, deciding to stay at a hotel for the night. He needed space to clear his head and make plans for the future. As he left the house, he felt a strange sense of relief. The nightmare was over, and he was ready to start a new chapter in his life, free from the toxicity that had plagued him for so long. Before driving off, he made one final call to his attorney, Jenny Hawkins, confirming their appointment for the next day. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was resolute. He would rebuild his life, find peace, and eventually happiness again. As he checked into the hotel, he thought about the support he would need. He decided to reach out to his sister Emily and his close friends. They would understand and offer the encouragement he needed. He also planned to seek counseling to help process the trauma and ensure he could move forward without carrying the emotional baggage of the past. Lying in the hotel bed that night, Mike felt a glimmer of hope. It was the beginning of a painful but necessary journey toward healing and reclaiming his life. He vowed to never let anyone take away his sense of self-worth again, and to surround himself with people who truly cared for and respected him. The report detailed that target Mike Sanders, referring to him, had dinner with what appeared to be a much younger woman. However, the report clarified that this woman was Emily Sanders, a senior at the University of Oregon in Eugene, and according to public records, Mike's youngest sister. The investigator noted that at no time was Mike involved in any illicit activities, nor did he engage in any inappropriate behavior with anyone, male or female. The report concluded that if Karen had bothered to read it, she would have known he was innocent of cheating. Instead, she saw the photo and jumped to her false conclusions. Mike printed the report and continued digging. He found emails from Karen to Jerry in which she falsely claimed that her husband was cheating on her and that she wanted revenge. Jerry responded with several emails, directing her to a website where she could enact her revenge. As Mike read through the correspondence, his blood pressure began to rise. He realized that what happened to him last night was carefully orchestrated. Karen had intentionally planned to have him assaulted, videotaped, and the video published on a website. He printed off the emails, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on him. He then checked her browser history and found that she had visited several sites similar to the one Jerry recommended. Upon visiting the site Jerry had suggested, Mike saw several sample videos featuring other men, presumably husbands, tied down and forced to watch as their wives had sex with multiple men, all while verbally degrading them. The final humiliation in each video was forcing the husbands to engage with Jerry. Mike instantly recognized the men in the videos: Ray, Tom, Jerry, Sam, Bull, and the other two men whose names he hadn't heard. It became clear that they were part of a larger scheme, already working for such a website. What shocked him even more was that the videos on the site were available to anyone who paid a premium fee. Mike knew from his own online experiences that there had to be a release form giving the site owners permission to publish the videos. He had never been given such an opportunity and wondered if the other men had signed such a form under duress or without fully understanding what they were signing. With the printed evidence in hand, Mike felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he had to act quickly and decisively to protect himself and bring Karen and her accomplices to justice. The betrayal was immense, but he was determined to see it through. The next morning, he met with Jenny Hawkins, his attorney, providing her with all the evidence he had gathered. Jenny was horrified as she read through the documents and viewed the emails. "This is beyond anything I've ever dealt with," she said, shaking her head. "We need to ensure you're protected, and we need to press charges against Karen and her accomplices." Mike nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. What do we do next? We'll start by filing for divorce immediately and requesting a restraining order against Karen and the men involved, Jenny explained. We'll also contact the police with this new evidence to strengthen the case against them. This is clear-cut harassment, assault, and defamation. They need to be held accountable." Mike agreed, feeling a sense of justice beginning to take shape. Jenny worked quickly, and by the end of the day, the divorce papers and restraining order were filed. They also submitted the evidence to the police, who were now fully aware of the extent of Karen's actions. As Mike left Jenny's office, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. There was still a long road ahead, but he knew he was on the right path. He contacted his sister, Emily, explaining the situation and seeking her support. Emily was shocked and furious, but promised to stand by him through the ordeal. Returning to the hotel, Mike allowed himself a moment of rest. He knew there would be difficult days ahead, but he was no longer alone in his fight. With his attorney, the police, and his sister's support, he felt a renewed strength to face whatever came next. Over the next few weeks, the legal process moved forward. Karen and the men involved were arrested and charged with multiple offenses. The website was investigated, and its operations were suspended pending further review. Mike's story spread, drawing public sympathy and outrage over the betrayal he had endured. Despite the pain and betrayal, Mike began to rebuild his life. He focused on his work, reconnected with friends and family, and sought counseling to help process the trauma. He found solace in the support of those who truly cared for him and was determined to emerge from this ordeal stronger and more resilient. As the legal battles continued, Mike remained steadfast. He knew justice would be served, and he looked forward to a future free from the toxic shadow that Karen had cast over his life. In time, he hoped to find peace and perhaps even love again, but for now he was content to heal and reclaim his sense of self-worth. Mike picked up his phone and called Detective Harris. Harris, the detective said when he answered. "Detective, this is Mike Sanders. I have some information here you may find interesting," Mike said. "Can you come to my house?" "Sure. Let me finish what I'm doing, and I'll be right over." "Thanks," Mike said before ending the call. As he waited for Harris, Mike performed a search to see if he could determine who owned the website. The registration was done in a way that kept the owner's name private, but he knew that a law enforcement agency could subpoena the records. He also identified the company hosting the site and printed that information out for Harris. About a half hour later, Harris rang the doorbell. "Thanks for coming," Detective Mike said, opening the door. "You have something for me?" Harris asked. "Yes, in my computer room," Mike replied. Harris followed him upstairs and examined the printouts Mike handed him. "This corroborates what we found at the house. From what we've seen, they've done this to several men," Harris said, flipping through the pages. "What about release forms?" Mike asked. "We found release forms signed by the wives. Even your wife signed a release form. We're still going through everything, though." "So she knew this was going on the internet?" Mike asked, feeling a fresh wave of betrayal. "Looks that way," Harris said. "But what about the husbands? Did they sign any forms?" Mike asked. "I don't recall seeing anything like that, but like I said, we're still going through all the evidence. Look, I'm going to have to confiscate your wife's computer for evidence." "Go ahead. I'd like to keep these printouts for my attorney, though." "The files are still there in her email," Mike said, handing over the computer. Harris nodded after giving it some thought. "Sure, but don't destroy them." "I won't," Mike assured him. "I just want to make sure my attorney has everything she needs." As Harris prepared to take the computer, Mike felt a sense of relief. The evidence was mounting against Karen and her accomplices, and the legal system was beginning to work in his favor. The detective packed up the computer and left, promising to keep Mike updated on any new developments. After Harris left, Mike took a moment to reflect on the whirlwind of events that had turned his life upside down. He had been betrayed in the most heinous way possible, but he was determined to emerge from this ordeal stronger and wiser. He picked up the phone and called his sister, Emily, to update her on the latest developments. "Emily, it's Mike. I wanted to let you know that the police are making progress. They found release forms signed by Karen and the other wives, but nothing from the husbands. Detective Harris just left with her computer." "I'm so sorry you're going through this," Emily said, her voice filled with concern. "But I'm glad the police are taking this seriously. Do you need anything?" "Just your support," Mike said. "It's been a tough few days, but I'm handling it. I have an appointment with my attorney tomorrow to discuss the next steps." "I'm here for you, Mike. We'll get through this together," Emily reassured him. After the call, Mike felt a renewed sense of determination. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face whatever came next. He spent the rest of the day organizing his thoughts and preparing for his meeting with Jenny Hawkins. The following day, he walked into Jenny's office with a stack of printouts and a clear sense of purpose. Jenny greeted him warmly and ushered him into her office. "Mike, I'm glad you're here. Let's go over what you found," she said, gesturing for him to take a seat. Mike handed her the printouts and explained the additional information he had gathered. Jenny's expression grew more serious as she reviewed the documents. "This is damning evidence," she said, looking up at Mike. "We can use this to strengthen your case and ensure that Karen and her accomplices face the consequences of their actions. I'll file the necessary motions to include this evidence and push for an expedited hearing." "Thank you, Jenny. I want to make sure justice is served," Mike said. "We'll get through this, Mike. Just keep your head up and stay focused. I'll handle the legal side of things," Jenny reassured him. As he left Jenny's office, Mike felt a sense of empowerment. He was taking control of his life and ensuring that those who wronged him would be held accountable. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he was no longer a victim. He was a man determined to reclaim his life and build a future free from the shadows of betrayal. After Harris left with Karen's computer, Mike sat at his machine and had a brainstorm. He began searching some of the video sites and found several fairly lengthy videos produced by the site. He scanned through them and saw that in each one, the husband was treated much as he was, while the wife took on all the other men except for Jerry. Each video ended with Jerry engaging in sex with the husbands. He looked back through the email thread he had printed from Karen's computer and read it carefully. There it was in black and white. "Just so you know," Jerry wrote, "we usually end the session with some sex involving the husband. Are you okay with that?" "Oh, definitely," Karen wrote back. "How far does it go?" "As far as you want, so long as your husband agrees," Jerry said. "I'd like to see him get screwed," Karen wrote. "Can you do that?" "Sure," Jerry wrote back, "but he has to agree." "Don't worry about that. I'll make him agree," Karen wrote. Mike felt his blood pressure begin to rise and stepped back from the computer, taking deep breaths. Unfortunately, that wasn't working, so he took another pill and went downstairs. He couldn't stand to be exposed to any more of this. The next day, he went to see Jenny Hawkins about a divorce. He made a copy of Karen's emails and took them with him. One copy would be for Jenny, and the other he would present to Karen's parents. He arrived at the office a few minutes early and was escorted right in. After the introductions, he explained his situation to Jenny and showed her the email thread between Karen and Jerry. Jenny listened without interruption, making notes as he spoke. She read the email thread and shook her head. "This is incredibly disturbing," Jenny said, her voice filled with sympathy. "Karen's actions are not only morally reprehensible but also illegal. We have a strong case for both the divorce and the criminal charges against her and the men involved." Mike nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. I just want to make sure she and her friends face the consequences of their actions. I also need to protect myself and rebuild my life. Jenny gave him a reassuring smile. We'll make sure of that. I'll file the divorce papers immediately and include all the evidence we've gathered. I'll also work with the police to ensure they have everything they need for the criminal case. Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate your help, Mike said, feeling a bit lighter knowing he had someone on his side. After leaving Jenny's office, Mike headed to meet Karen's parents. He knew this conversation would be difficult, but they needed to understand the gravity of what their daughter had done. He arrived at their house and knocked on the door. Marge answered, her face a mix of worry and anger. Mike, what's going on? Karen called us from jail, and she sounded hysterical, Marge said, ushering him inside. I need to show you something, Mike said, handing her the printouts of the email thread. Marge and her husband, Paul, sat down and began reading. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock and finally to horror. Is this true? Paul asked, looking up at Mike. Every word, Mike replied. Karen plotted this whole thing. She was driven by jealousy and didn't care about the truth. She orchestrated my humiliation and intended to have it recorded and shared online. Marge's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe she would do something like this. This isn't the daughter we raised. People change, Mike said softly. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you needed to know the truth. Paul put a comforting arm around his wife. Thank you for showing us this, Mike. We will talk to Karen, but it looks like she has a lot to answer for. Mike nodded. I hope she gets the help she needs, but I can't be a part of her life anymore. I'm moving forward with the divorce. We understand, Paul said, his voice steady. Take care of yourself, Mike. You deserve better. Leaving their house, Mike felt a sense of closure. He had done what he needed to do, and now it was time to focus on his healing. He drove back to his hotel, feeling a mix of emotions, but also a renewed sense of determination. The days turned into weeks, and Mike slowly began to rebuild his life. The legal proceedings moved forward, and Karen and her accomplices faced the consequences of their actions. The support from his family, friends, and attorney gave him the strength he needed to heal and move on. One evening, as he sat in his hotel room, reflecting on everything that had happened, Mike received a call from Emily. Hey, big brother, she said cheerfully. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. I'm doing okay, Emily, Mike replied, smiling at the sound of her voice. It's been tough, but I'm getting through it. Good to hear. Remember, you're stronger than you think, and you've got a whole bunch of people who love you and are rooting for you. Thanks, Emily. That means a lot. As he ended the call, Mike felt a warmth spread through him. Despite the pain and betrayal, he had found support and strength in those who truly cared for him. He knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but he was ready to face them head on. He was determined to reclaim his life and build a future filled with peace and happiness. You know, I thought I had seen it all. Fortunately for you, this state allows for divorce on the grounds of adultery, cruelty, and abuse. I think this covers all three of those situations. You say she was arrested and is being held without bail? Jenny asked. Yes, Mike replied. Jenny turned to her computer and began typing. A few moments later, she nodded. I see here that she was arraigned yesterday and was slapped with a whole slew of charges: spousal abuse, sexual assault, conspiracy to commit assault, fraud, and illegal imprisonment, for starters. The judge felt she was dangerous enough to keep in custody. It also means we have substantial legal grounds to proceed with the divorce and ensure she faces the consequences of her actions. Mike felt a mixture of relief and sadness wash over him. I just want to move on and put all this behind me." "And you will," Mike Jenny said reassuringly. "With these charges and the evidence we have, the divorce should proceed smoothly. You'll be able to start rebuilding your life without her." "Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate everything you're doing for me," Mike said, feeling a bit lighter. "We'll get through this together," Jenny said with a supportive smile. "Just make sure to keep all your documentation and evidence safe. The more organized we are, the stronger your case will be." Mike left Jenny's office feeling more hopeful than he had in weeks. He knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but having a solid legal team and supportive friends and family gave him the strength he needed. The following days were filled with preparations and meetings. Mike worked closely with Jenny to ensure all necessary documents were filed and that his case was as strong as possible. He also began to focus on his well-being, seeking therapy to help process the trauma and regain his sense of self. One afternoon, Mike decided to visit Emily at her university. He needed to reconnect with his family and remind himself of the positive relationships in his life. When he arrived, Emily greeted him with a big hug. "Mike, it's so good to see you," she said, her eyes filled with concern and relief. "It's good to see you too," Mike replied, feeling a sense of comfort in her presence. They spent the afternoon talking and catching up, sharing stories and supporting each other. Emily listened intently as Mike opened up about everything that had happened, offering her unwavering support. "You didn't deserve any of this," Emily said firmly. "But I'm proud of how you're handling it. You're strong, and you're doing the right thing by taking care of yourself and seeking justice." "Thanks, Emily. Your support means the world to me," Mike said, grateful for her presence in his life. As the weeks passed, the legal proceedings moved forward. Karen and her accomplices faced their charges in court, and Mike's divorce case gained traction. With Jenny's guidance and the overwhelming evidence, the case against Karen was solid. During this time, Mike also began to rediscover his passions and interests. He started working out again, reconnecting with friends, and even exploring new hobbies. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild his life, piece by piece. One evening, Mike received a call from Jenny. "Mike, I have good news. The judge has granted the divorce, and with the criminal charges Karen is facing, you'll have no further obligations toward her. You're free to move on with your life." A wave of relief washed over Mike. "Thank you, Jenny. This is the best news I've heard in a long time." "You deserve it, Mike. You've been through hell, but you've come out stronger on the other side. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to reach out," Jenny said. As he hung up the phone, Mike felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. The nightmare was finally over, and he could now focus on building a new, happier life. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but with the support of his family and friends and the determination he had found within himself, he was ready to face whatever the future held. He stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the fresh air, feeling truly free for the first time in months. Mike knew he had a long journey ahead, but he was ready to embrace it with open arms, leaving the past behind and looking forward to a brighter future. Give me an outro for everything above. Ask audiences what they have learned so far, and ask them to comment on one thing they have learned and will bring to practice in life below this video, and add CTA if you like this video. Please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.